The Summer Games Minute, brought to you by Mass Mutual. It is one of the most coveted trophies in the world, but are gold medals really gold? Well, mostly, they're not. The gold medals given out these days are nearly entirely silver and are plated with pure gold to give them that iconic sheen. Silver medals are, of course, made with silver, and bronze medals are a combination of copper and other metals like tin or zinc. And while winning an Olympic medal is priceless, the value of the materials in the medal are not. In recent games, some of the materials used to make the medals have come from recycled cell phones. Mass Mutual celebrates women's sports history and understands the nuances in how women want and need to manage their finances. With quality product solutions and guidance, a Mass Mutual financial professional can help you plan for both short-term and long-term money goals. Learn more and get started at massmutual.com.
Think you know the Brooks Ghost? Think again. Introducing the all-new, better-than-ever Ghost 16. Now with nitrogen-infused cushioning for lightweight, supreme softness that feels good every step, every street, every single day. So go ahead, take your daily joyride in the all-new nitrogen-infused Ghost 16. It'll turn your everyday miles into everyday endorphins. Let's run there. Head to brooksrunning.com to learn more.
Whoa. Landing an account this big will totally change my landscaping business. It's going to mean hiring more guys and more equipment and new trucks for the new guys to drive the new equipment in. I don't know if I'm ready.
You can do this, and Ford Pro FinSimple can help. Our experts are ready to make growing pains less painful for your business with flexible financing solutions that meet the needs of your business today when you need them. Get started at fordpro.com/financing.
The Athletic.
Every time we talk about, well, anything really to do with the 2024 MotoGP season build-up, we end up straying into the 2025 rider market instead. And frankly, fair enough on our part, because with 18 of the 22 riders on the grid out of contract at the end of the year, a 6-time MotoGP champion sat on a 1-year satellite team deal poised to receive bigger offers, a host of rising stars desperate for factory team contracts, and 2 past champions currently stuck at struggling fallen giants. The potential for another seismic shake-up is absolutely undeniable. So this week on the Race MotoGP podcast, we are making no apologies whatsoever for going 100% all in on the 2025 silly season. And we're going to do it in characteristically gung-ho and mockable fashion by coming up with a very early prediction for next year's entire grid lineup. So, here are the rules. We'll be working our way down through the factory teams first in order of the 2023 championship. Simon Patterson, Val Khorounzhiy are here, and they will each pitch the lineup they think that team is most likely to have in 2025. Not who they would necessarily pick, but what they think is going to happen. And I'm Matt Beer, and in my role as host, I get the fun job of adjudicating and deciding who's made the most persuasive case and using that to piece together our 2025 lineup. We've done this once before, around about 2 years ago now. We predicted the 2023 MotoGP rider lineup. Do you guys remember how that went?
Oh, yeah, 100% hit rate, right? Like, got all of them?
I was just going to say that I presume badly.
Well, I checked again tonight. We got it 50% right.
Huh.
And I don't think, considering that we did that before Suzuki pulled out and threw a few curveballs in.
I was about to say.
I don't think that's a bad effort.
Yeah.
Did we get any of the unlikely ones, like of the left field ones, or did we just get the people sticking around?
So we got Joan Mir at Honda. I was quite pleased with that. The one I was really pleased with was we got Raul Fernandez at RNF. Now, we thought that would be because RNF would be running Yamahas, and that would be Yamaha's way of winning its fight for Fernandez.
Yeah.
But, he did get there, just they were running Aprilias by then. I think I class those as our big wins. The rest of it was fairly nuts in retrospect. Aaron Canet and Ayagura and Toprak, Razgat Lioglu and Joe Roberts have all not had the MotoGP career we expected by now. So
Yet.
Screwed that one a little bit. We stuck Pedro Acosta into the field a year early, which, I don't think that would be a bad shout.
That wasn't unreasonable.
And we thought Jorge Martin would be into his second year in factory Ducati colours by now. Again, not a completely crazy early 22 prediction. But let's see if we can beat that 50% rate tonight. So we're going to start with Ducati, and I'm going to roll my big wooden dice of decision making to decide who goes first. So Simon, odd or even?
Even. Sound effects tonight.
Oh, that was loud.
It was loud. It's a 3. Yeah, it's a 3. So Val, you get to go first. You get first pick for who will be the 2025 Ducati lineup. Current lineup, of course, is double champion.
We're going to get one of it. Yeah, we're going to get one of them.
Double champion Pecco Bagnaia is out of contract. Very strong rumours that will soon change, and yeah, rightly so. His teammate is currently Enea Bastianini, whose first year in Ducati Red was about 60% broken, 30% rubbish, and then 10% Sepang. So, Val, who are you putting on the factory Ducatis for 2025?
Well, Pecco Bagnaia is obviously moving on. I mean, it's not worked at all. It's been a total disaster. So obviously Pecco Bagnaia is going to be picked for seat number 1. I think that extension, I'd be a little bit surprised if it isn't done already, if the signature isn't already on there, or at least on some version of it that is being finalized. And the other seat, I am very unconvincedly, which is not even a word, but whatever, sticking with Enea Bastianini. Ooh. So that's a boring start because that's the same lineup. But I think in this particular case, it is also kind of a brave pick in a weird way.
Okay, Simon, who are you going for Ducati?
I have a confession to make. I sat down and wrote out all this beforehand, and I actually agree with Val. I have the same 2 names.
Oh, that's deeply uninspiring start. So.
It's a really boring start, isn't it? But I think Pecco is basically a done deal as far as I'm concerned. Yeah. And Bastianini, he finally his testing program this season was the testing program he should have had last season, what we expected from him 12 months ago. And given that we then expected him 12 months ago to also be a title contender when the season started, I think that as long as he can stay uninjured, there's a real possibility that he'll do enough early on this year to convince Ducati that 2 Italian riders is the perfect lineup for them.
Do I think Bastianini is quicker than Martin necessarily? No, not really. Do I think he's a likelier world champion for Ducati? No, not really. Do I think he's an easier fit, and that Martin is maybe a bit too vocal and a bit too much of a maverick to fit into a lineup with your already lead bet main rider? Yes, basically, yeah, that's what I'm going at. I think Bastianini is just an easier fit. He is quick. He, on last year's, just being an easier fit wouldn't have been enough because last year was a disaster. But he looks more back to his normal self now, and his normal self is a very, very good MotoGP rider who can win a title, but won't necessarily be re-signed by Ducati if he is re-signed by Ducati to do so, but just to have a very strong second option in case that second option is required to bring home the silverware.
And that's something that you wouldn't have put Bastianini in that role ahead of 2023. You'd have seen him as someone who might destabilize Bagnaia in the team because he looked so good at Gresini, and we're all expecting fireworks on that front. If the outcome of last year is that at his best, Bastianini isn't quite what Bagnaia has turned into in terms of a surefire championship contender year in, year out, then actually that suits Ducati quite well. If Bastianini can just do the Sepang thing more often, lift his lows from last season, look how he looks in testing right now, that is a lot less hassle for Ducati than throwing in Martin or bringing Marquez into that mix, or even Marco Bezzecchi probably. So I can see that logic. I do. If Bastianini does build on this, though, I can see things getting disruptive this year. I don't have doubts about Bagnaia, but he has won these titles on the best bike. He did make slightly heavy weather of some parts of last season. Okay, there was injuries involved and moments of discomfort with the bike, but I still don't feel we've yet seen Bagnaia in a true equal machinery, equal chance head to head that will really, really answer those final question marks. So I do think Bastianini plus Bagnaia still has the potential to be destructively non-ideal for Ducati, but right now I think you've both made sound logical picks there. The Bastianini we look like we're getting in 2024 is what Ducati needs alongside Bagnaia, in the hope Bagnaia carries on winning titles into the future. So we're going to lock in Bagnaia and Bastianini, a boringly unchanged Ducati lineup to start with. But let's go to KTM next. So Simon's turn to pick first on KTM. Brad Binder, talisman rider, part of the furniture. Jack Miller looked like a great pick for the first sort of third-ish of 2023, and then a little bit of, not an iffy one certainly, but the case for keeping him on long-term got weaker as that season went on. Simon, who are you putting at KTM for 2025?
I mean, we've got a fairly easy start to this because Binder's got a contract.
Yes.
And as much as KTM are a bit dubious when it comes to rider contracts, sometimes they're not getting rid of Brad Binder. So we know Brad Binder is staying.
Yeah.
One of my more confident bets in this whole thing is that his teammate's going to be Pedro Acosta. I think we've already seen enough from the rookie to show that he's going to deliver this year. I think Jack Miller's already been given something of a warning to shape up or ship out by team boss Francesco Godotti during the team launch, when he told him he had to basically behave better on track this year, which is not really a surprise given Jack's tendency to either A, fall off, or B, burn his tires out and go from a podium contention into the back of the field. I think Acosta all round is a better bet, and that they're going to try and get him into factory colours as soon as possible, because while he might be a factory rider of sorts right now on the Tech 3 gas, he's not a factory rider in that they're not going to capitalise on having him in their colours, and they're going to want to try and rectify that ASAP.
I've got a feeling Val might not be a million miles off that prediction with his pick, but let's see.
No, yeah, it's the same lineup again. So that's unfortunate, really, for the Larry start to this episode, because we're 2 for 2 on
I know. I should have gone for, I don't know, thrown Carol Abraham in early on or something, but no. Okay,
I think they'll
be fun to come. I'm confident of this.
I think this has come up before on an earlier episode, but yeah, that's also very much a series of events that make sense to me in my head. I think Pedro Acosta's had a very assured start to life in MotoGP. He's only going to get better, and I think the Gas brand, it is important to promote that brand, and that brand is going to benefit from a year of Pedro Acosta, but then KTM will take precedence, I think, in terms of having him. And I suspect Pedro Acosta himself will want to go for the full beans factory team. As good as Tech 3 is at what Tech 3 does, I think Pedro Acosta will want to be in KTM Orange in 25, and I think he is a strong enough package to where he will get his way.
If we get that lineup in 2025, Binder and Acosta, who do you think will come out on top at the end of that season?
We're going to 2026 now. What's happening here?
Yeah, why not? If you're going to pick the same, if you're going to make the same prediction, I'm going to try and stoke this agreement in a different way. It's how it works.
I gotta see at least one race of Acosta before I have any feeling about that. Because it's terrible. It feels. I don't know. This is bad.
Simon, well, Val's vacillating. What's your gut feeling? Who would come out on top in that matchup?
Acosta's going to win the 2026 World Championship.
There you go. That's a proper.
No one's going to remember my Larry prediction by then. Acosta there's so much potential in Acosta. There is so much. Like, he is a future world champion. And Brad Binder, I know Brad Binder's super talented and I know he's super fast, but I'm just not convinced still that there's a world championship in him in the future, because he still tends to do dumb stuff now and then and tends to not be there some weekends and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think Acosta is I know he doesn't like being called the next Marc Marquez, but he's the next Marc Marquez level talent coming up through the championship.
I think Binder will be ahead. If they are teammates in 25, I would expect Binder to be ahead in terms of point scoring, but I do think Acosta is the likelier world champion, which is not to say that I don't think Binder can do it. I just think Acosta is for me, he is the likelier champion. But there's still a lot of water that needs to go under that's not the saying. Anyway.
I mean, given that it's now like 2.5 years since Binder's won a race in the dry, I'm not even entirely convinced that he's going to be KTM's next race winner. Because Acosta shaking shit up and winning races this year wouldn't actually surprise me all that much. And I think given Binder's form in the last 2 seasons, there's as much chance right now as Acosta being that man as there is of him.
That is a mad stat that I just did not have in my head, that his last dry win was that long ago. I think Binder's kind of deceptive because you see this glorious racecraft so often, and so many races where he's the only person not on a Ducati who's in the mix somewhere. But because of how Ducati's been, you can't really judge. is the package not there and he's hauling it as high as he possibly can, or is he not got that last little bit to make KTM the regular winner it's now capable of? And Jack Miller and Miguel Oliveira, riders like that have not been great benchmarks to judge Binder by, which is not to say Binder hasn't been impressive, because I've been super impressed by Binder constantly since he came to MotoGP, but it's easy to forget, as I did, that he's not necessarily executed it to the finish in that sort of way that often.
And just to clarify that stat, whenever I say it's been 2.5 years since KTM's last dry win, that wasn't Binder. Binder's last dry MotoGP win was his third ever race in the start of 2020.
Yeah, Bruno.
It's 3.5 years for him, because it's Oliveira that's been winning since.
The sprints Brad Binder won for me, they were MotoGP races. So I don't really feel that one.
I mean, they were hard earned.
He won from 15th.
Yeah,
he won from 15th in Argentina. He was 15th to start a sprint. Yeah,
sprints aren't races.
He wasn't messing about with how he won those races, but
I know.
Also, that Red Bull Ring win. This is a totally flawed argument. I was going to say, yeah, it was a wet win, but only 2 seconds of it were wet, and he did it on slick, so that barely counts.
The white flag was out, so he just didn't see it.
Another example of how, even though Binder might not always get the job done consistently, he's been so entertaining since he came to MotoGP. Let's move on to Aprilia. Current lineup there: Aleix Espargaro, who may or may not be retiring; Maverick Vinales, who may or may not get a result on a Sunday at some point. Who can say? Val, your turn to pick first. Who do you see being on the factory Aprilias in 2025?
All right, well, time to go into Crazy Town finally, and not the one-hit wonder from the 2000s. But,
oh, no, I don't want to hear you say that.
Yeah, it'll be... Well, I don't want to say it will be. Will is not a word that should apply here, but on the notes I have in front of my eyes, and I can't believe I'm about to read them out, and I'm still second-guessing myself.
Do it. No.
Aleix Espargaro and Jorge Martin are my Aprilia lineup.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right, go on then.
If Jorge Martin is snubbed by Ducati, which I think is quite possible, he becomes the kind of peg that any factory team can fill any hole with. That didn't sound great, but you know what I mean. Aleix Espargaro and Jorge Martin get on famously. It is way too early for Aleix Espargaro to step aside. He has been awesome this preseason, and I suspect he's going to have some bonkers good races this season. Maybe even the season opener in Qatar can be quite good. So I don't expect him to leave at the end of the year, because when you hear him talk, there's this feeling that I think we all also share, is that he's sort of Benjamin Buttoning his MotoGP career. He's getting much better every year instead of how it should go. He's like an infinitely better rider than he was when he joined MotoGP, and then he was in 250s and that kind of thing. So I don't think he can go next season. And again, he and Jorge Martin get on famously. Martin, I think I'm not convinced there's room at the end for Honda or Yamaha, and as KTM we've already discussed. But I think a factory offer at Aprilia could come. It wouldn't be maybe the greatest money ever, but it would be like a point to prove and a real vision for the future, and something really romantic, something he can get really into with Aleix as his teammate. I think that could work.
Simon?
So we're going to like break some sort of a record here by having Val and I agreeing with each other for the longest period of time ever in this podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say I agree with his pick for Jorge Martin.
Wow.
All right.
Okay.
For all the same reasons. I think that he's going to end this year bitter at Ducati not offering him a factory ride, be desperate to get on a factory bike anywhere, and I think the Aprilia is going to present the best option for him, given that the two Japanese manufacturers are going to take a bit of time to close the door, and we've already basically said that KTM is a super strong lineup. So I think Aprilia will be his best option. I think Aleix Espargaro will help sort of streamline that move, but I think that he'll be the one replacing Aleix, not joining him, because I think Aleix's role as a development rider is going to be super strong, and Aprilia are going to want him to be their test rider for the new bike. I also think that his season this year is not going to be as strong as it looks right now, because that's kind of what Aprilia and Aleix have done for the last few years. They've started the season really strong, and then it falls off a cliff about round 4. And that's with Argentina in the calendar early on, which they don't have this year to make themselves look really good. So, yeah, I don't think Aleix is going to be there. I think Martin's teammate is going to be Marco Bezzecchi.
Okay, this is getting good. What's your logic?
Aprilia want an Italian, first of all. I think that fits. Bezzecchi has already said that he doesn't want to go to Pramac because, you know, the whole point of VR46 is creating factory riders, and there's no point in moving from one satellite Ducati to another. That's the logic he used when he turned it down last season, and I think that logic still applies. And then, you know, if he's not going to do that, if he desperately wants to be a factory rider, where else is he going to go? The Aprilia is the next best fit for him. And I think that Maverick Vinales is persistently underperforming. He, you know, how long have we been talking about what he's going to do in the Aprilia? And he does all of that up until like Saturday morning, and then suddenly it's turn 4 and he's P17 trying to struggle his way through the pack again. There's only so long that Aprilia are going to humor that on a bike that is really, really good at the minute. Why not get some hot, fresh, passionate Italian talent in and sign Bezzecchi?
Can Aprilia afford Martin and Bezzecchi? Because these are two quick young guys who could be getting some decent offers.
I mean, they're going to be paid less than they would be at, say, Ducati. Well, maybe not at Ducati because the way that they pay their riders and their strange structure, but they're going to be paid less than they are at KTM or Yamaha or Honda, but they're going to be paid more than they are as satellite VR46 riders, or, you know, there's going to be more money. Aprilia, no, probably they can't afford to, but Piaggio Group can. Plus, this is also a team that's been, you know, perennially struggling to find sponsorship. They're the only factory team in the grid that doesn't have a title, the only team in the grid that doesn't have a title sponsor. Well, signing those two names is a hell of a lot more exciting than signing Maverick Vinales and Aleix Espargaro again. But you would have to think that there's going to be a bit of sponsorship cash comes with those two names. So from a commercial point of view, it might actually make sense as well, which I hadn't thought about until you asked that.
Right, so it's my first adjudication, Espargaro or Bezzecchi getting that second seat at Aprilia. I'm not just saying this because it's the Laria idea, I promise, but I am going to go with Bezzecchi because the Espargaro story has to finish at some point. And I think it either should finish on a high with him having the season it looks like he might have, and then hopefully, and I want this, I always really want riders to walk away at their peak if possible, which is a really hard thing for them to judge. I wish Valentino Rossi had stopped a good number of years earlier. But given everything Espargaro's achieved, everything he's achieved with Aprilia, I'd love to see him win 3 or 4 races really well this year, get a home win again as well, and then just go, right, I'm done. I've achieved so much more than any of you lot ever expected before I got into MotoGP. I've made this project possible. I'll hang around, get some wild cards if the rules ever allow that for a team achieving as much as Aprilia is. And I'll be a talisman for this project, and I'll ride my bicycle around a lot and have a great time. But I'm done. Or this season won't turn out as he was expecting, and actually that's an even bigger reason and a way to go, okay, don't keep putting yourself through this. You had a great career. Step away and just be, again, carry on being a talisman. So on those grounds, I'm going to put Marco Bezzecchi alongside Jorge Martin as our picks for the 2025 Factory Aprilia lineup.
You know we love talking stats here at The Athletic. Here's one that's super simple to remember. Discover automatically doubles the cash back you've earned on your credit card at the end of your first year with Cash Back Match. That means with Discover, you could turn $150 cash back to $300. That's right, you could put it towards some memorabilia you've had your eye on, or treat yourself to a premium sports network. You earn and Discover doubles. See terms at discover.com/credit card.
We'll get back to the pod in a moment, but first of all, let me tell you about Grammarly. Email, Google Docs, Slack, you write across multiple platforms and places during your workday, so delivering consistent, high-quality communication everywhere is key. Grammarly is an AI writing partner that helps you get work done faster with high-quality writing for better projects, proposals, presentations, and more. Best of all, Grammarly works where you work, so you can get more done no matter what tools you use. As a journalist and podcast host, I'm constantly writing and rewriting copy and drawing up scripts. It's part of the job, and Grammarly helps make it faster. It's got some really cool features like tone suggestions to help you strike the right balance between direct and friendly in work emails. Plus, Grammarly has a ton of other great features like advanced spelling, grammar, punctuation, and conciseness suggestions to ensure your writing is professional, mistake-free, and clear. Get AI writing support that works where you work. Sign up and download for free at grammarly.com/podcast. That's GRAMMARLY.com/podcast. Easier said, done.
Right, so we've done the dominant mark and the two marks most likely to give it something to think about in 2024. Let's go on to the struggling fallen giants, starting with Yamaha. Current lineup at Yamaha: Fabio Quartararo, the man who announces he wants to leave his team in most media debriefs, or at least hints that way, and Alex Rins, freshly arrived from LCR Honda, having somehow won a race on a Honda last season. Whose turn to go first? Simon's turn to go first. Who do you see being at Yamaha in 2025?
So I feel like we had so much excitement with Aprilia, and now I'm going to go back to being boring and say that they're going to keep both their riders. Rins, I think Rins is contracted. I think he went in
I think it's just 1 year.
I'm sure it's a 1+1 at least. So he's I think he's fairly comfortable there right now. He's settled in well, and they need a bit of consistency. So I wouldn't even be surprised if he signed up fairly early on if he has a decent start to the year, just as a bit of a buffer against whatever the mad Frenchman on the other side of the garage might do. Although in saying that, I also think that the mad Frenchman on the other side of the garage is going to bitch and moan for the first half of the season about how the bike needs to get better, and then sign up to ride the same bike again, having seen it getting a little bit better. He's kind of switched from moaning about how they're not listening to him and not doing what he tells them, to moaning that they're not doing what he tells them quick enough. But they are doing it, and I think that longer term, that's a fairly good sign. He's won his championship. He knows he can win more championships. He knows that, I think that he's probably not a Marc Marquez level talent, in that he's not going to go and win a title year one on a satellite Ducati, on a year-old satellite Ducati. So the best way to win another championship for Fabio Quartararo, is to stick with a factory bike. With the concessions, with the effort that they're clearly putting into it, Yamaha aren't going to be terrible forever. And I think in the end, despite a lot of protesting, we're just going to see him stay where he is.
Lots of nodding from Val. Does that mean same pick for you?
Yeah. But honestly, I do think Quartararo would leave Yamaha if there was an obvious alternative to go to. But the thing for me is Ducati. Again, let's preface all of this by saying Fabio Quartararo is great, and if you're a MotoGP brand and you've decided, actually I'm going to make a play for Fabio Quartararo, you're smart. This is a smart thing to do. But Ducati doesn't really need him. KTM, probably not the way the wind is blowing for them. Aprilia will probably have a go, I'd imagine, but are you definitely betting on it over Yamaha? I'm not sure. And I think, and Honda is just, you're exchanging the same sort of thing, but a brand that's probably on an even longer recovery timeline, and whose bike you don't know so well. And I think Yamaha will put the kind of numbers in front of him in terms of financial compensation that none of the other brands will stump, and definitely none of the satellite teams will offer. I think he'll re-sign. He'll make bank doing it, because also he's in a position of power in terms of that, he will make it seem like he's signing with a lesser bike, because he is. The bike is not as good as Fabio Quartararo is. So Quartararo can ask for a premium on his services to sacrifice a few trophies, in theory. Although, again, I don't know where he goes if he leaves Yamaha, but to sacrifice a few trophies to stick around with the Yamaha project. I don't even so much think it'll be competitive. I genuinely, I'd say it would be financial and nowhere else to really go to get the same sort of both luxury and long-term stability and money and factory status. Yeah. And for the other one, I don't see why you would make Alex Rins a 1-year rental. I don't think you're going to get a better rider for your second bike than Alex Rins, so he stays.
Yeah, I think you've both made good arguments there. It depends a little bit how Yamaha starts the season. I think this is the sort of volatile part of our bet, where Aprilia could be a big player around some of these riders if Yamaha just looks like it's actually going nowhere fast enough. I don't see Rins wanting to jump ship, although I'm sure if he is as impressive on the Yamaha as he was early doors on the LCR Honda, I think he would be of interest to other people. Quartararo's in a weird position. We ended up going down this road a little bit on the recent podcast where we were like, where would he actually go that would definitely be better? Because I don't see him going to a satellite bike, like you say, somewhere else. There's a reason we're going to the factories in this podcast first, even though a lot of those factories bikes will not be as competitive this coming year as a satellite Ducati. Factory status has that luster for riders. A proven world champion stepping down from factory to satellite is such a rarity. Marquez is doing it for fairly one-off reasons. So yeah, Aprilia, like you say, is the only logical place Quartararo could go, and I don't see him looking at Aprilia with complete confidence that long term it's going to be a better bet if Yamaha can sort itself out, put all its resources into it. So yeah, let's lock that in. Fabio Quartararo and Alex Rins sticking around at Yamaha next season. On to the last of our factory teams. Honda has Luca Marini under a more than 1 year contract, but we can still debate this because contracts have been ripped up very recently, and Joan Mir going to the last year of his contract at Honda. So whose turn to pick first? Is it back to Val? Yeah, back to Val. Who do you see as being on the Hondas next season?
I think Luca Marini stays because I think for that contract to be ripped up, it would have to be mutual, and I can't really see that. And the other name is Marc Marquez, so my Honda lineup is Luca Marini and Marc Marquez, with the caveat that honestly, if this Gresini Ducati season for Marc is not so good, I completely see the possibility of him just walking away and ending his career there. I think that is possible. If he sees some fundamental limitations in his game now and realizes that another title might actually be a long shot, then I think, what else is he here for? He's not here to snipe occasional wins, I don't think. Maybe this year that will be okay, but if there's something fundamental that will hint that you can't have more than that, then I think that could be it. But I don't think that will be the case, and that's why I think he is returning to Honda next year instead of, because again, he needs to make up for the money that he didn't get by leaving a very lucrative factory contract and a fourth year. And I know what you'll say, but he earned enough already over the first 3 years, but I don't think that's how people's financial planning normally works. I think when there's some money you're supposed to get and you don't get it, it will weigh pretty heavily on you getting it sooner or later in some way, compensating somehow, somewhere down the line, I think will matter. So yeah, I think that's how he compensates, by returning to Honda in factory colors, and maybe the bike's a bit better by then. Maybe still not the best, but better than what it is right now and more fun to ride. So yeah, Luca Marini and Marc Marquez.
Simon, your Honda pick. Oh, a little head shake, promising. No?
Yeah, no, it's because I'm really disappointed in this, and I agree with Val. I think that what we're going to see from Marc Marquez, based on what we've already seen in testing, is that, so I know that I've been kind of quite a strong feeling about how he could be a title contender this year, and I've eased off a bit on that, having seen him in pre-season and having heard, stories and sort of data about what he's performing and what he's doing. And listening to himself as well, obviously, which everyone heard in the podcast, where he sounds like the most unconvinced person of everyone about what he's going to do this year. So I think we're going to see him winning races in the Gresini bike, for sure. We're going to see the Honda looking substantially better this season as they slowly but surely make improvements to it. And we're going to get to the end of the year and Marc Marquez is going to decide, you know what, I could win at Sachsenring, Circuit of the Americas, and Valencia and Aragon on a Repsol Honda. If I can do it in a Gresini Ducati that's a year old, because their bike looks a bit better and it's not trying to kill the riders every weekend. I might as well go back there and earn 20 million euros doing it instead of earning 250,000 euros at Gresini. I think that it's either he's going to end this season so strongly that he's going to think I could win on that Honda even though it's going to get a bit better, or he's going to end this season thinking I don't know if I can win anymore, so I might as well not do that and get paid 10 times as much money. And both of those paths leads me back to Honda for him.
It's interesting how it's only taken those couple of tests for this to become a realistic conversation. A few months ago, we were all saying this relationship's ending, but it's ending in a way that sounds like it'll be rekindled eventually. The logic you both put forward there isn't necessarily that much about Honda's progress. It's more about Marquez and his own feeling. But Honda's made enough progress already that it feels realistic rather than completely bonkers to suggest it could just be a 1 year trip away before he returns home, as it were.
And let's remember that this isn't a normal MotoGP season where we're going to see Honda start the season on a bike and then essentially finish the season on a very similar bike, because with the concessions that they've got this year, we're hopefully going to see massive changes. There's rumors that they've booked 20 different days of testing at a whole host of circuits already with Stefan Bradl. And with Joan Mir and Luca Marini, because they can use those guys to test, and with Johan Zarco and Taka Nakagami, from what it sounds like, which is unheard of. So they are making the most of the concessions that they've been given, and those concessions are only going to be around for a finite amount of time, because we're going to see them making really big progress to get to the front again. That's my, the big debate for this year wasn't whether or not Honda was going to get better once we found out what the concessions were. It was, are Honda and Yamaha going to fully exploit these new concessions that they've been offered in order to make the obvious step that's capable with them? And it sounds like they're both going to do that. So,
yeah, I should say, you mentioned progress, Matt, and I agree with progress. I'm not convinced they've made competitive progress. Like, that's the part I'm really not sure about yet.
Yeah.
I think they've just made progress in terms of that the bike isn't actively loathed by riders anymore. They don't actively say awful things or like flip it off.
That's a big deal after last year.
Yeah.
Nobody's given it the finger yet, which is, I think that's quite something.
That we've seen.
People aren't crashing their brains out every other session, which is, I think, quite important. I think there might be a good combination there of where it doesn't actually go, like, it doesn't go out of attractive concession status even for the start of next year. Like, it might be a rank C still or something. Rank C isn't rank D, obviously. Rank D is you get all the free testing and stuff, but it's still a bit extra. And it could still stay rank D. I think that's also entirely possible given how good the Ducatis are. So I think that part might make it a bit attractive, but it's just, it's like, for me, it's the financial compensation and reunion and that kind of stuff, and the bike being nicer and less injuring people.
I'm not going to disagree with that, as much as the romantic in me would love Marquez to stick around at Gresini a little bit longer and see where that might go.
Simon, your other seat is also Luca Marini, right? Because that didn't even...
Yeah, I'm assuming, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's contracted, and I think that, I think that's fairly locked in.
I was going to say, I just don't. I think everything around Marini is too sensible to be breaking contracts, but he has just walked off with Ducati to go and ride a Honda, so who knows. So our factory lineup is complete. Ducati, Pecco Bagnaia, Enea Bastianini still. KTM, Brad Binder joined by Pedro Acosta. Aprilia, woohoo! It's Jorge Martin and Marco Bezzecchi. Yamaha still Fabio Quartararo, Alex Rins, and Honda brings home Marc Marquez alongside Luca Marini. So now things should start getting messy. We're into satellites, and a lot of satellite bikes can win races. Val's got his hand up.
Yeah, before we go into complete divergence territory, as is the nature with these things, I just like to point out there's a stereotype that Simon and I disagree all the time, and we went 4 for 5 here on identical lineups, and even the one we had split, we still had one rider in common who isn't currently at the team.
Yeah, we went 9 for 10 here.
Yeah,
you did.
We went 9 for 10.
Yeah.
That is very impressive.
So similarly, when I was doing the little tally chart to see how wrong or right we were about when last time we did this, I was like, wow, we were right about so many things. And then I got to the middle half of the field and that tally chart swung. Yeah. And I can see this tally chart going much the same way. So we're going to the satellites. We have riders of the caliber of Jack Miller, Joan Mir, Maverick Vinales, and Aleix Espargaro on the table, having been booted out of their current teams by our machinations so far. On to Pramac Ducati, which currently has Jorge Martin and Franco Morbidelli. Jorge Martin we've already placed at Aprilia, so there's at least one newcomer coming into Pramac. Whose turn are we on now? It's Simon's turn to go first.
It is. So one side of the garage, I think it's looking like this is going to make Val really happy, like it's going to be Firmin Aldeguer. Ducati have already kind of hinted that they're really serious about getting his name on a contract very early on. And I think based on the way he finished last season, based on how we've seen him performing, they're the factory that's going to have the opportunity to, at the very least, sign him, not knowing where they're going to put him, but knowing that they've got 6 bikes where they could fit him in anywhere. But I think that with how strong he is and with some of the other performers, I mean, the fact that we've already said there's going to be a space at Gresini, or at Pramac, with Martin going elsewhere, and with Franco Morbidelli, who I think is going to struggle a bit this season, I think that creates an opportunity, and we're going to see Aldeguer signed up and on a confirmed on a GP25 pretty early on this season. On the other side of the garage, I think we're going to see another one of the natural progressions that we've seen in MotoGP in the last few years. We're going to see Gresini rider start the season off where he finished off last season, even though he's not a Gresini rider anymore. And Fabio Di Giannantonio is going to get the nod to step up to Pramac pretty quickly, because I think there's every possibility that he's going to win a few races early on in the season. I think he's going to be looking Enea Bastianini-esque by the time we get 4 or 5 rounds in. And they're gonna give him the nod to step up, because partly because he really deserves it, and partly because I think maybe a few other Ducati riders who would get the move before him, like Marco Bezzecchi, don't really want it.
So Val, why did you throw your hands over your face during that? Is that in extreme agreement?
Well, we're 5 for 6 now, not 4 for 5. Yeah. But we're 5 of 6 because I did have to make a last minute change, so I'll walk us through that. But before that, let's start with Firmin Aldeguer, who I also expect on the Pramac, because of a twofold reason. Reason number one is it sounds like Ducati's okay to offer that, and Ducati sounds just very excited about having Firmin, and just the way Davide Tardossi spoke to you, Simon, about it, it just sounds like they're just waiting for his yes.
Yeah.
So they're ready to have him in the camp. They just need him to say yes. And on Aldeguer's side, how do you say no to a Pramac Ducati, right, for your MotoGP graduation? Who are the 2 guys who most recently graduated to MotoGP with Pramac Ducati? Pecco Bagnaia, Jorge Martin.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good company. It works out. It's a good deal. Even though Pecco Bagnaia had actually, at Pramac, he wasn't maybe the best, but it still got him where he needed to be. If that's on the table for Firmin Aldeguer, he should have accepted that yesterday. And I wouldn't be surprised if he has in some way, shape, or form. I expect him there in 2025, I think. Now, the other seat was, for me, originally the name I had there. But as you've told us, Matt, once those names are off the table higher up,
yeah,
then you need to make adjustments on the fly, which I quickly did very panically. That's not a word. Marco Bezzecchi was going to be the name I had there, because I think if Di Giannantonio is a bigger problem for him this season at the start of the year than we maybe expected, then that's going to dent his factory chances. But he'll also see how good the 2024 Ducatis are. So maybe there'll be part of him that's like, okay, maybe this time I should try to take the work spec Ducati. I'll go to them again and see if maybe there's a bit of interest to do that deal again. But since we've removed Bezzecchi from the equation, Fabio Di Giannantonio goes to Pramac in my book. I think the VR46 team, even though he looks like a very shrewd signing, I think they'll be quite interested in going back to an academy sort of structure potentially in terms of its signings. And I think Di Giannantonio is gelling so well with the Ducatis suddenly now that there might be a bit of interest to just, keep progressing him up the ladder and seeing what his actual ceiling is here.
the other element as well is like we talked about the luster factory seats have for riders, and we're getting to this point where, and okay, this is just not in our game theory here, but I think it's realistic in real life as well. A team like Pramac, which fought very seriously for the riders' title, won the team's title, because it's not a factory, it's not in some ways a prime destination for people. And that's how you end up with Franco Morbidelli there. It's a twofold thing of like, okay, it's got the top spec bikes, but Bezzecchi turns it down because he's more comfortable somewhere else, doesn't see it as enough of a jump. Other riders wouldn't go there because they'd see it as a step down, even though it's a bike that some guy nearly won the title with last year. And it ends up not scrabbling for riders as such, but with people sort of failing upwards into it. I don't think Digi will be doing that, but certainly if this comes to pass, it is another sign of the riders who could win a title at Pramac Ducati choosing to go to or stay with a less competitive factory instead.
I think that the lessons that Di Giannantonio learned in the last 3 months of last year means that he doesn't have the ego to turn down good rides.
Yeah.
I think the fact that he went essentially into the last round of the championship, not really knowing where he was going to be next season, means that, you know, he's lost any pretensions he might have had about what he's going to do in the future and where he's going to end up. So if he's offered a factory spec bike, he is not going to be the person on this grid that's going to be precious about the fact that it's not in a factory team. He's just going to jump on it and see how fast he can go.
I don't think that, for instance, you know, Fabio Quartararo would be a very interesting idea on Pramac Ducati. I think that would kick so much butt. That would be the best thing ever. Yes. But I don't think financially that quite works, or in terms of prestige, or in terms of everything. I'm not sure there will be the desire from all the sides involved to make something like that happen. Jack Miller, I don't think would be desperate to return. Doesn't feel like a very Maverick Vinales move to me, even though, again, I'd love to see something like that. I'd be really interested in what that looks like. Franco Morbidelli staying, I think, is entirely possible, but I am concerned about the situation that he finds himself in to start this season, and things will move very fast. I fear a bit for how that will influence him on the bike and him working through his progressions with the Ducati while all the contractual madness is going on. So yeah, Digi is almost, I don't want to say he's like the last option remaining, because that's not, on current form, that's not the case. He's been very, very convincing. But he needs to do more still for me for the Pramac thing to fully make sense in my head. But I'm looking through the options, and that's the one that works in my tiny puny brain.
On to Digia's current team in real life, VR46 Ducati. Now, you are allowed to switch manufacturers in this if you want to as well, because this is a possibility here. Currently, Fabio Di Giannantonio and Marco Bezzecchi, we've moved both of those on already. Bez to Aprilia, Digia to Pramac. Val, your turn to go first. Who do you see landing at VR46?
So my VR46 lineup is now, because originally Di Giannantonio was going to stay, but we've ruined all of that, and I'm having to change things on the fly. But to be fair, this one also makes sense to me. Franco Morbidelli and Celestino Vietti is my VR46 lineup, and I think for me that doesn't really so much depend on the bike. Maybe Morbidelli would hesitate about returning to a Yamaha M1, but...
Oh, so you are making the manufacturer switch happen here as well?
Well, yeah, if they go to Yamaha, then maybe. If they stay at Ducati, then we don't know what he's like on a Ducati. We've not seen Franco Morbidelli in a Ducati meaningfully, apart from Valencia, where everybody else was looking on somebody else at Ducati. So poor Franco, nobody really noticed what was going on there. With all due respect, also he didn't speak to the media, so that's partly on him and on his team, or something like that. Anyway, sorry. I think Vietti having the IO Moto2 ride, I think he's a better Moto2 rider than we felt. I think we sort of have, some of us, and maybe also me partly, maybe Simon partly, maybe everybody partly, has buyer's remorse in seeing him, really shoot out of the blocks a couple of years ago, and then his title challenge just peter out completely, and him seeming really unable to recapture that sort of form. I've always felt that form was a little bit deceptive, but it's still, the results are there for everybody to be seen. But I think he's a good enough rider to where with an IO prepared bike, he's going to have a good Moto2 season. And I think the Rossi camp VR46, and the management and the team is invested enough and interested enough in seeing him in MotoGP sooner or later. They just need like a good season to justify it. So I do see Vietti there, and for Morbidelli, I think they'll just, if he wants to stay in MotoGP, I think they will move heaven and earth to make that happen, and they won't even have to try too hard. I think a seat will be there.
I'm glad we finally found something to disagree on.
Yay! Good.
I agree on half of it. I agree that Celestino Vietti is the obvious choice for VR46 to move up. I think that is the sort of the natural progression. It's the only really progression left in terms of the VR46 Academy. And he makes sense, especially if he has a decent Moto2 season, which people tend to have whenever they're on an IO KTM. That tends to be the thing that takes Moto2 riders who are insanely fast but love to crash their brains out and turns them into champions. Yeah. So I think Vietti is in a really good position to go into the 24 season looking at the 25 MotoGP season. Makes a lot of sense. The other side of the garage is the hilarious prediction I'm going to make in this entire thing. And Val is going to really strongly disagree with me on it. I'm going to say that VR46's new partner, Yamaha, are instead going to want to see someone like Ayumi Sasaki, who is now in their VR46 feeder academy, in their Moto2 team. Yamaha's VR46 ran Yamaha-backed Moto2 team. I think there's a real Dorna desire to always have a bit of Japanese talent in this grid. I think that Sasaki has proven in Moto2 that in Moto3 that he's a fairly level head and is capable of riding bigger machinery. And I think that Yamaha picking him means that they obviously see a bit of something in him. It would be a bit of new blood come into the championship. It would shake things up again. I have to admit, I originally had Morbidelli in this spot as well until I kind of thought about it again. And I think that the last thing that Yamaha is going to want is another Franco Morbidelli back on their bike. I think that his past history with the factory kind of rules him out. Beyond the fact that we don't know what we're going to get from him this season. We don't know if he's fixed. We don't know if he's going to come back to be the old Franco Morbidelli that we all love to see go super fast, or if he's going to be the one of the past few seasons that was a bit lackluster. So yeah, with all that in mind, I am going with the controversial and unusual Vietti Sasaki combo, knowing that Val's going to disagree with me.
Well, I have to rule on this one, and I'm going to take it to a sort of semi-recount because I think I need to be swung on the certainty of a manufacturer switch here, because to me, that Yamaha point with Morbidelli and history, although he still was runner for the championship on a Yamaha not that long ago, but his situation's changed a fair bit since then. My initial thought here was I don't see VR46 letting Morbidelli drop out without one last chance.
Yeah.
Given how this season has started for him in particular, we might be in a position where we already know his 2024 is not going to be a realistic one because he's missed all of the testing. He's got another injury to recover from. I just think the VR46 organisation will want to take care of one of its own a little bit better than that if it has a space on the bike. The Sasaki argument, I totally see the logic for in terms of that existing relationship and kind of the purpose of VR46 in developing talent, but maybe that's 1 year further down the line when Morbidelli turns out he doesn't work out. But that Yamaha thing is a stumbling block. Equally, like I say, he was good before the original knee injury. Val, you're keen to come in?
Yeah, I'm just, if VR46 does get the Yamaha gig, I'm still, given that it doesn't have to agree to being Yamaha's satellite team. I'm not sure Yamaha will be in a position where it can really strong arm VR46 too much over who it picks. Although, again, there's financial considerations. You can make things happen when you need to make them happen, and it's all fine. But although keeping Franco Morbidelli on the grid, I think will be a VR46 very sensitive, sort of important point of consideration, and the sort of thing that can make or break relationships with manufacturers. It's a rider that means so much to the program. For me, Sasaki, we've disagreed on Sasaki's ultimate ceiling, Simon, but it's more just there are riders for whom going into Moto2, you don't need to finish in the top 5 to then immediately go to MotoGP. Like Joan Mir didn't, and it was fine. And there were places that were still willing to offer him a MotoGP seat right away, even a factory seat. Worked out pretty well. I think Sasaki's not quite in that place. So, and I don't think he'll finish in the top 5 this season. So if he does get there, I don't see him being a one and done in Moto2. So for me, it's a step too early, even if Yamaha clearly does see something interesting there.
I mean, I would feel much more comfortable making this prediction if Sasaki already had a year in Moto2 done. Like there's no question in that, and that's what makes it super Larry for me. I think that the VR4060 Yamaha thing is looking fairly, like from what I've heard, it's looking like it's coming together pretty quickly. Yamaha are clearly in a position where they desperately want a factory a satellite team again, and where, you know, for the first time in a long time, they're really willing to invest heavily to get one. But with that investment, it's going to mean that some team's going to save a load of money in terms of, you know, what they have to pay to have their bikes, but they're also going to lose a bit of control as well. And that's going to mean that Yamaha have a say over the rider lineup. If I'm honest, if I see Franco Morbidelli back in a Yamaha in the near future, then it's as Jonathan Ray's replacement at their factory World Superbike team, which is no, it's genuinely, that's a move that I could see Morbidelli making and enjoying and being fast and winning at again, because we know how talented he is. That would be a good signing for Superbikes. It would be a good signing for Yamaha. I think it would be a relatively easy sell within VR46 because they'd be keeping him as a World Championship rider. You know, imagine the buzz whenever VR46 somehow managed to win both MotoGP and World Superbike championships in the same season. There's a lot of excitement around that, right? So I think for those reasons, that kind of tips the odds against Morbidelli, and maybe not necessarily for Sasaki, but nonetheless against Morbidelli. And I will admit there are other names who I equally considered for this position, who people are going to be surprised that don't have a seat in my fictional grid as we go further down it, who also potentially could drop in there.
I am going to stick with Morbidelli for this one. On my grounds here is, I think I see your point about Yamaha potentially getting control and being able to do a financial deal that helps that. But at the same time, right now, Yamaha needs a satellite team. It really, really needs one. Yamaha could also do the PR boost of getting Valentino Rossi back in its fold. Those two elements are big deals for Yamaha. If Valentino Rossi and his people are saying, we need to give this protege of ours who's just been repeatedly injured for a couple of seasons. Okay, he was rubbish on your bike last time, but he's just had a concussion-wrecked season that happened before it even began. If we're coming with you, we're bringing this guy with us. We want to give him one more chance at MotoGP. I think that's hard to turn down when Yamaha needs VR46 that much. So I am locking Morbidelli in, and we're going on to our last Ducati satellite, which is currently the Marquez brothers, Grassini, Mark and Alex. But we have moved Mark back to Honda already. So who is Alex Marquez still at Grassini? Who joins him? Simon, you have first pick.
Alex Marquez stays. I think he's going to do well for them this year. Maybe not exceptional, but he's going to do what they need and win a few races and be in the mix at a few races and look pretty good doing it. And, you know, has brought a bit of sponsorship money with them. There's loads of reasons why I think Alex Marquez makes a pretty safe, sensible bet for Grassini. I think on the other side of the garage with Marc Marquez being deposed Marc Marquez leaving and deposing Joan Mir at a Repsol Honda, I think Joan Mir is the perfect signing to reunite with Frankie Carcetti and be a bit of a Larry underdog and win a few races in 2025 for Grassini. I think that would be a really sensible, smart fit.
I can see this being more agreement, but where's Val going to go?
It was basically more agreement, and at the last second I just went mad and I changed something. I mentioned this pre-recording, so you'll see where this is going. But honestly, Matt, you can just pencil in Mir. I'm not going to have a good argument here. My Grassini Ducati lineup is Alex Marquez and Maverick Vinales, and
go on.
It would rule. My argument is it would kick butt. It would. I don't know. I'm trying not to go into profanities here. I'd love for this to happen. I'd watch the absolute hell of it out of it, and I think Maverick Vinales, I'm not even sure that, you know, when Simon spoke about him leaving Aprilia, it was more Maverick Vinales getting booted out. I'm not sure. I think it could, like, if it does come to a divorce, I think it'll be like a mutual thing where Vinales just hits himself against the brick wall of that particular bike too much and decides that he can make it work elsewhere in non-factory status at a different bike that he will feel may suit him better, without all the headaches of factory rider status development. Just, a bike that's proven that works in everybody's hands, that he just doesn't have to worry about anything but just riding it quick. I mean, Gresini Ducati's the seat for that, I think. And if Mark does leave them after one season, which I think is entirely possible, I think as far as a replacement goes, Maverick Vinales is no Marc Marquez, but Maverick Vinales would be another luxury-ish signing for a team at, I don't know, I shouldn't say that about Gresini anymore, but I shouldn't say that. But Maverick Vinales would sort of be in that same vein of, let's go for something serious here. Let's hit home runs. Let's do something crazy and something mega. Alex Marquez is in the other seat. Congratulations, Alex Marquez.
As much as I kind of mock Vinales for not actually achieving much beyond practice sessions on this podcast, I really do believe in Vinales as a talent. And I think that's why I do mock him, because it's so frustrating that this guy who looked so good at so many points just doesn't deliver on it. And so a big part of me, Val, would love to agree with you and go, yeah, just stick him on a well-sorted Ducati and watch him actually fly and actually do it on a Sunday.
I remember 10 years ago when we were both in very different parts of our journalism careers. And I think as an intern or something, I floated the idea of Maverick Vinales and a Ducati, and that sounded like the best thing at the time. We both were super excited about that idea. This is sort of part inspired by that memory of a younger, happier Val. I shouldn't say that, it's depressing. What? Of a younger Val. Fewer worries, different geographical location. Okay. Anyway, that's it. It's a nostalgic mental pick. Go with Joan Mir. That's the normal person's decision here.
As much as like life has changed in that time for everybody, it's also a period in which Maverick Vinales has failed to live up to all that potential he was showing when he was riding around Paris Hilton's bike in junior categories. So
he's won like 8 races or what, 8 or 9.
Yeah,
That's
but this guy
so
should have this guy should have been a champion. If he'd lived up to the best bits of what he was promising before he got to Yamaha, if he'd lived up to what he did when he stepped on that Yamaha for that first race in 2017 and just looked straight away like, yeah, you were the obvious pick to replace Jorge Lorenzo, you were going to make this work, just hasn't happened enough since then. And I think if you're a team in Gresini's position, a team that could sign a Marc Marquez right now, okay, Mir, there's so much that's a question mark about Mir. That first year at Honda was just a mess, but he was on the big orange mess. Suzuki, he won a title either side of that. There was lots that was promising, but can you judge it as, is he definitely everything that title suggested? You still don't really know, but there's more that Mir's delivered than Vinales has delivered over these years. Mir has made a world championship happen. Vinales hasn't. Mir hasn't been around nearly as long as Vinales really either. I think you look, if you're weighing up those two, I would say Mir is a safer bet. So on those grounds, I'm going to lock him in at Gresini, which means our satellite Ducati lineup, well, actually, it might not be satellite Ducati lineup. Our current Ducati satellite team lineup is Pramac, is Fermin Aldiger and Fabio Di Gianantonio. VR46, maybe Yamaha, is Celestino Vietti and Franco Morbidelli. And Gresini Ducati is Alex Marquez and Joan Mir.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
Okay, 3 teams, 6 seats left. We're on to Tech 3 Gas, currently home of Pedro Acosta and Augusto Fernandez, but we have already moved Pedro Acosta on. And Augusto Fernandez has a very shaky start to 2024. So who on earth are you two going to put in this team for next season? Right, I've lost track again of who goes first this time.
That should be me. Yes.
Is it Val?
Yes, it should be me.
It's Val.
It's Val, yeah. Val, who are you putting on Texas Gas next year?
I have very unconvincingly have Augusto Fernandez sticking around, which is it's not the easiest thing to justify, given I have written a thing about how Tech 3 expects him to score 200 points this season, and he has extremely not looked like a 200 points rider in preseason testing. He has looked rough. I think that's fair to say. I don't think that's unduly harsh. I don't think he would disagree with that. But I think he's a talented enough rider, and I think he's an affable enough rider to where the team will be really keen to help him, and KTM will be really keen to help him. And I just think KTM and GasGas, so the Pure Mobility Group, are a bit tired of ditching riders and being seen like the program that ditches riders. So I think he gets a 1-year reprieve there. And in the other ride, I think Jack Miller takes the paycheck and goes to represent GasGas for a bit in GasGas Red. Because he's proven himself to be a very valuable asset to KTM for everything that's being said about how he doesn't necessarily deliver on Sundays in the way that you would like him to, how he there's the race-based longevity isn't necessarily there, and all of the concerns that you may have, which I think are overstated sometimes, but are clearly there. I think he's been important in the Ducatification of KTM in many ways. I think he's a good development rider to have. I think he's a good part of the program to have. I think Ducati benefited from having him around for a bit, and KTM / GasGas will be very keen to do the same. And the question for me is only there, if I do think that Acosta will be promoted ahead of him, would Miller accept the demotion like Miguel Oliveira did not earlier? But I think he would, because he's fought paycheck to paycheck so much in his MotoGP career. I think the pay will still be pretty great. I think the bike will still be good. I think the team will be a good team. I don't think he'll get factory offers elsewhere if he does drop out of KTM. So this might end up the best route to staying in MotoGP. Makes sense to me, and I think it will eventually make sense to him, even if it will sting. But again, that's all assuming that Acosta does replace him, which is obviously a hell of an assumption to make at this point. But that's what we're doing here, right? So
it makes sense to all those people. Does it make sense to Simon?
I think that the Augusto Fernandez side of it does. I think that he's shown enough potential that even after a bit of a rocky start to 2024 through testing, there's going to be a bit of good form comes there. They're going to want a bit of consistency and continuity going forward. I think that he's a fairly steady set of hands to kind of quasi-lead the GasGas operation. I think on the other side of the garage, they're potentially going to talk to Jack Miller, say that they're interested in him, look like they're going to be interested in him. And then in Moto2, the fiery, interesting KTM-backed Deniz Onku is going to win a couple of races, and KTM are going to realize that they could do with a new rider and a young rider like they always do, and immediately sack off any opportunity Miller has and sign Onku. I do not trust KTM to change their ways. They're always looking at the next thing. And I think that given how fast Onku was on a Moto3 bike and given the size that he's grown to very quickly, I think he's going to make a fairly seamless adoption to Moto2 and be really quick. And while I put Sasaki in as a bit of a Moto2 rookie who has a very outside possibility of going to MotoGP, I think that Onku is a lot more realistic, both in the short term and in the longer term, for being a MotoGP rider, because of his speed, because of his talent, because of how interesting he is, because he is a fiery character, and that's going to translate well, and because of his nationality. I think there's a strong argument for having more diverse riders in this grid, and I think that given how crazy Turkey are for MotoGP, for motorbike racing, how crazy they are for Toprak Ratsatlioglu and how crazy they were for Keenan Sofloglu before him. Yeah, I think Diniz fits this role for me.
Val, I'm going to let you give your take on that to see if you persuade me either way, because this is where my own rules for this game fall down a little bit, because I could be easily persuaded on the Onku thing, but I'd be more like to keep Jack Miller in the fold alongside him than Fernandez. But where do you go, Val? Where's your thought on Onku, first of all? Is Simon's rating of him realistic?
Onku's really good, but I think for Onku, maybe to a lesser extent, but still to an extent, I think it's just the same argument as I had for Sasaki. Is I think he would need a top 5 first season in Moto2, and I shouldn't say I don't really see that happening, but I think it is far from a given. Let's put it that way. And even if he does get a top 5 season in Moto2, again, I think just there will be a certain desire at KTM to keep the lineup as much as they can and to keep all the riders and their family that they have there. And I think Jack Miller is enough of an asset to allow them to wait a bit on Onku. Even if Onku impresses right away in Moto2, which he very well might, I think it's supposed to suit him better than Moto3. And in Moto3, he was a very eye-catching rider. It's a pretty good qualifier, which is always indicative of something. I think they'll wait a bit on him and maybe line him up to replace Augusto Fernandez down the line. Don't know. That's how I would see it. They also do have other potential options in that KTM tree. There's every year a new rider can emerge. What if Isan Guevara sorts himself out? That'll be interesting. What if something else happens? Lots of possibilities there. So maybe that also diluted it for me a bit, that there's no... Onku is probably the closest, but there's no like clear, obvious pick that I would go to shelve either Augusto Fernandez or Jack Miller. In my eyes, yeah. I'm
gonna go with Val for this one, because I don't think there's right now a convincing enough case to boot Jack Miller, 4-time race winner, 20 million time podium finisher, twice in the top 5 in the championship with Ducati pretty recently, to boot him off the grid in favour of Onku right now. I could see that argument for Fernandez if Fernandez's testing form carries into this season, but I wrote the rules and you both went for Fernandez, so he stays, Miller stays as well. And that means I kind of believe KTM saying that they want to keep it all the same rider lineup, which I also don't. But I think I'm thinking of that in terms of, would they keep all 4 of these guys if they could pitch for Marc Marquez? But you've also made convincing cases for why Marquez is more likely to end up on a Honda. Also, when you've got Acosta and Binder in your lineup, there's a degree of whatever about the other bikes. You know you've got somebody who can do very well for you. You know you've probably got the next big thing. You can, the other guys matter less. On to Trackhouse Aprilia, which right now is Miguel Oliveira and Raul Fernandez, sometime rising KTM star, of course. Simon, your turn here first. Who are you putting on the Trackhouse bikes next season?
So I've just hastily rewritten mine because my backup option there was actually Jack Miller, because I think Larry, English speaking, I think he'd have been a bit of a good left field pick for them.
Yeah.
Alongside Raul Fernandez, who I think that Aprilia are going to push really hard to keep, because they see a lot of strength in him. They see potential. I mean, we've seen the potential since this season has started. So I think that's a fairly obvious one for me to keep. In the absence of Miller and not being allowed to pick him, I'm not going to lie, it's a straight shoot between Maverick Vinales and Miguel Oliveira for me. I think that there's an argument to be made for Oliveira, and that it's a bit of consistency. It's who the team knows. But there's also an argument to be made for Vinales in that he's a bigger name for the sport and he's faster. Both on an Aprilia and in general. I'm going to go with Vinales.
Val?
All right. Well, we're in a bit of a predicament because now I need to do 4D chess and realize how scientific I want this endeavor to be, and whether I want to circumvent Matt's rules or play fully by them, ignorant of what the end goal truly is.
That sounds worrying.
All right. Now here's what I mean. Let's lock Raul Fernandez into one of them.
Okay.
All right. So I
agree with that.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I think he's a very good fit at this point of his career. I don't think he'll quite make an ironclad case for a works team seat this year, but I think he'll make a case to where Aprilia will see him as, one day down the line, this could really work. This could be quite interesting. So I think he sticks around. My original pick for the second Trackhouse ride was Joan Mir, because that's where he ended up in my situation. I think David Abbreviate reunion too, and just generally think there's something to be said for that, and it's a good outlet. Then I was mulling between Maverick Vinales and Miguel Oliveira, and Vinales, I don't see him accepting it. Like that's really my problem with it. The same way I do see Jack Miller accepting a demotion because of how his MotoGP career has gone, sort of from year to year, from paycheck to paycheck. Maverick Vinales has heard too much about how he is a future world champion, I think, to accept being demoted by Aprilia. So I don't quite see him there, even though it could be quite decent for Trackhouse and Aprilia. So then I was like, well, do I go for Miguel Oliveira, who I think can be quite good on the bike still, and I hope will be good this year, and I think was more impressive last year than it seemed, and that the injuries really obscured that? Or do I just go for Tony Arbolino? And I don't know. Tell me what to do. Should I go for Miguel? Let's just go for Miguel Oliveira. I think that makes sense to me. I don't want to be too Larry. God forbid we're too Larry on this predictions podcast.
Oh, okay. So I've got a straight choice now between Oliveira or Vinales. The will he accept it argument is a strong one, but also Vinales is the man who walked out of Yamaha to join Aprilia at a time when Aprilia was not the Aprilia it is right now. It was that potentially as a theory in the future, but at that point, Maverick Vinales blowing up his Yamaha to walk out to Aprilia was a completely crazy idea that he was willing to do to stay involved in the championship when things were going wrong. If I was team boss picking between Vinales and Oliveira, I would have more faith in the ultimate peaks of Vinales. So I'm going to go with Aprilia offering enough of a sweetener to keep Vinales in the fold at Trackhouse. Same spec bike potentially as the factory team. I think I can see that happening. So down to LCR Honda currently, Johan Zarco, Taka Nakagami. Val, you have first pick here. Who do you see there in a year's time?
Well, Johan Zarco and Honda and LCR have made it really easy for me by signing a 2-year deal that there's no reason in the world to break next year. So he's staying. And the other seat, of course, because it's LCR, because it's Idemitsu LCR, this will never change. It'll be year 2080 and we'll still be doing this. It'll happen every single year. Ayagura goes into the other seat. I think that's self-explanatory. I think we're going to end the podcast there. That's, you've heard the Ayagura case many times on many a podcast, I suspect. But yeah.
Simon?
I can't not agree with him. That's the thing. It's boring, but it's boring, but it's boring for a reason. We cannot see another year of Taka Nakagami looking really disappointing. Even as the Honda gets better, they have to change something. And it's either Ogura or Sasaki, but I think Ogura is jumping, so he's not going to be in a Calyx next season. He's going to be on a speed-up bike in a different team, in a non-Honda team that I think is going to give him a little bit more kind of flexibility, freedom on a bike that will perform well at certain circuits, maybe not everywhere, but it'll perform well at certain places. And the end result is going to be that we're going to see him looking pretty good and surprising a few people with results in Moto2, leading to making the move fairly easy. And hopefully he's also going to realize that you can't wait in Moto2 forever for a championship to come along, because that's just not how it works.
No, and if the Honda looks a little bit less like it's going to break all his bones instantly, that is also more appealing for him to accept the move this time.
Yeah, exactly.
So we are done. Let's go backwards with our grid. LCR Honda will be Johan Zarco and Ayagura. Trackhouse Aprilia will keep Raul Fernandez and bring in Maverick Vinales, demoted from the factory. Tech 3 Gas keeps Augusto Fernandez, and in a similar situation gets Jack Miller demoted from the KTM factory. Gresini Ducati keeps Alex Marquez. Joan Mir reunites with Frankie Carchetti over there as well. VR46 Ducati all change. Franco Morbidelli comes across from Pramac and it promotes Celestino Vietti. Pramac Ducati all change as well. Fermin Aldiger comes in as a rookie and Fabio D'Antonio moves over from VR46. Honda welcomes back Marc Marquez alongside Luca Marini. No change at Yamaha, still Fabio Quartararo, Alex Rins. Aprilia has the blockbuster signing of Jorge Martin and Marco Bezzecchi. I really want that to happen now. I think that'll be hysterical in all sorts of ways. KTM promotes Pedro Acosta onto its big bike alongside Brad Binder, and Ducati sticks with the tried and tested Pecco Bagnaia and Enea Bastianini, which means Aleix Espargaro, Miguel Oliveira and Taka Nakagami are booted off our theoretical MotoGP grid. Now, Espargaro has talked of retirement anyway. Nakagami has been on thin ice for a long time. Where do you see... I think we're fairly convinced that if Espargaro isn't racing in MotoGP, he is very much still part of the Aprilia family. Where do you guys see Oliveira and Nakagami going next if they're off the MotoGP grid?
Nakagami will become a Honda test rider and win the next 9 Suzuki 8Rs for them.
Yes.
And Miguel Oliveira, I think whichever rider on this grid whichever other MotoGP rider doesn't make it onto the MotoGP grid, given the depth of talent here. In this case, it's Miguel Oliveira, but it could easily be a few other people, or it could have been, will go to World Superbikes and will be the hot signing for Ducati to replace Alvaro Bautista with. He has basically said he's retiring at the end of 24 anyway.
Yeah, and when you say whoever doesn't make the MotoGP grid, we've kept them in with some perhaps slightly too conservative adjudicating from me, but Morbidelli, Miller, Vinales are all riders who are fighting for the MotoGP future to a strong degree this season, even though you wouldn't necessarily say that Moto2 is bursting with people who you'd hurry up to MotoGP apart from Aldiger. So there are riders with a massive point to prove. Even if some of the big names we've talked about, like Quartararo, end up not actually moving, even if there's not actually a factory Ducati vacancy, there are riders who've really got to prove they should still be on the MotoGP grid in 2025, and it's going to be a tense few months for them as this all shakes out. We will return to this prediction in a year's time, obviously, and work out if we can improve on our 50% success rate of our first experiment with this. Val's shaking his head. Simon is just giggling already. I think we might have gone more Larry this time in some ways, but also I think we might be wrong-footed by some people we think are staying, and it doesn't happen. I think we maybe look back on this and we go, we should have gone more Larry. That Sasaki thing was spot on. Or yeah, Quartararo is my doubt. I'd say I can see him and Yamaha bursting and not taking too much.
I'm gonna bum everyone out to end this podcast. I hope everything we said works out exactly like we said it, because that'll mean everybody stayed healthy through the season. Nobody's leg got snapped in half in a career-ending crash. Because every time I think about the season ahead, that's my first concern over any silly season, over any championship battle. Honestly, that's the part that keeps me awake at night. So let's hope we're actually completely 100% correct. That would be awesome from that regard. And also, I'm ready to record the first line of next year's version of this podcast, which is that the LCR Honda prediction will be again Ayogura. Doing it every year. It's a tradition.
Well, we said last time Suzuki pulling out wrong-footed us, so we're prepared to, I don't see this lot pulling out right now, but let's be wrong-footed by Triumph turning up or something and getting that slot that they wouldn't give to the third KTM team. Right. Thank you for your patience through that, listeners. Feel free to let us know some of your own predictions for the grid. You can email podcasts@the-race.com. We might fit in a few in our next episode. Just give our view on some of your suggestions for particular moves or the entire grid if you want. I think we might have some fun doing that. But next week we'll be mainly previewing the 2024 season and what actually happened. I think we might make some more Larry predictions in that one as well. We'll be back in your ears in a week's time. Speak to you then.
The Athletic.